The NBA offseason has been busy, filled with a ton of teams making a multitude of moves in hopes of contending for an NBA championship. In this day and age of the NBA, there are so many talented players scattered all around the league that it's really hard to pinpoint which team has the best chance of winning that Larry O'Brien trophy. Last season, we saw a lot of craziness as the Miami Heat became the first 8th seed since the 1999 Knicks to make it to the NBA Finals. And this type of craziness happens pretty often. It's always a team that no one really expects to make much noise that propels themselves into the elite status of the league. And I think we'll see that happen again this year. A team that not a lot of people have faith in will make some big noise in the NBA. A team full of crazy young talent, hungry veterans, and an organization that's been thirsty for some success. That team is the Minnesota Timberwolves. For years, the Minnesota Timberwolves have been trying to get back to their glory days during the early 2000s. But haven't been able to until this upcoming season. Yes, I believe the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to shock a lot of people this season as they are the most underrated team in the NBA. In my opinion, I don't want any backlash if I'm wrong. This team is led by a young superstar who goes by the name of Anthony Edwards. You might have heard of him. Anthony Edwards has been a household name since his days at Georgia. His otherworldly athleticism, aggressive scoring nature, and overall knack for the game are the biggest reasons as to why he was the first overall pick just a few years ago. A strong end to the season 2 years ago put everybody on notice on just how good Anthony Edwards could be. And this season, he put it all together. 24.5 points, almost 6 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game were his averages this past season, earning him his first of many All-Star nods. In the playoffs, his game took another level, averaging 31.5 points per game against the NBA champion Denver Nuggets in the first round. But his summer wouldn't start just yet. Anthony was elected to play with Team USA in the FIBA tournament, where USA ended up placing 4th overall and qualifying for the World Cup next year. He was a clear top player on a team that featured players like Brandon Ingram, Jalen Brunson, and Tyrese Halliburton. And barring anything unforeseen, I expect him to be on Team USA's roster in 2024. For the Wolves to make the leap that I expect him to, Ant will have to continue this superstar trajectory that he's on, as I think everyone expects him to do. He's turning heads at such a young age, taking over a team in a way that only so few were able to. And doing this for a small market will do wonders for the NBA and their future. But of course, it isn't just Anthony Edwards on this team. The Wolves have another offensive mastermind in Karl Anthony Towns. An enigma is the best way to describe Cat, as his player archetype just isn't normal. In the height of his NBA career, Cat was a nightly 25 and 10 guy, knocking down threes at a 40% clip and shooting like 8 threes a game or something crazy. His playmaking is so advanced for a big. His 7-foot, 250-pound frame allows him to muscle through people in the paint. Like, he should be virtually unstoppable, and yet he still has so many flaws in his game. Defensively, Cat is a turnstile. He doesn't operate well defending in space and isn't a sufficient rim protector. His athleticism may pop out, but he isn't a good vertical leaper. He's very foul prone as he has the tenacity to bite on pump fakes, showing his lack of discipline. And all of these flaws shine bright in the playoffs as Cat is a notorious playoff dropper. He's failed to average more than 21.8 points per game in any series that he's played in so far, despite his best season scoring averages being a lot higher than that. His efficiency significantly drops, his playmaking quality becomes subpar at best, the defense is already bad, and there have been times where he's been played off the floor. This season just wasn't the best for Karl Anthony Towns as he was battling injuries. He played in just 29 games and averaged the least amount of points, rebounds, and shot his worst mark from 3 since his rookie season. Now things get interesting with Cat, as the year prior, he signed a supermax deal that averages over $50 million annually, meaning that the Wolves are essentially stuck with him. Now there have been rumors of moves trying to be made, but nothing has ever formulated, for obvious reasons. Now with the new CBA in place, it would make some sense for the Wolves to look to move off him, but with their lack of assets, it just doesn't seem possible. At this point, it makes a lot of sense for the Wolves to keep him as Cat is still a pretty good player, so it'll be interesting to see how he'll bounce back this season. And it's not like the Wolves haven't been trying to formulate a team that fits around him. They have made a multitude of trades to do so, with the biggest one coming last offseason. The Rudy Gobert trade was the move of the decade, if I have to be honest with you, with how out of left field it was and just how much the Wolves gave up. This move turned a lot of heads, but the more it gets talked about and the more we're seeing it play out, this trade might actually make some sense. Rudy Gobert is one of the greatest defensive players in NBA history, as he's one of 4 players to win 3 or more Defensive Player of the Year awards. In today's NBA, it makes sense for a team's defensive philosophy to just have their perimeter players funnel everything to their rim protectors and just have their rim protectors do the rest. That thinking worked out for the Wolves this season as they were 10th in defensive rating, and I expect that to be much higher this season as everyone gets more acclimated into their roles. Last season, Rudy Gobert averaged 13.4 points, 11.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. Now, those stats may not seem 4 first-round picks worthy, but with the eye test, you can see the impact that he has on the defensive end. Now, offensively, it was another story. He struggled mightily in this area, and rightfully so. He's playing a new system, playing with teammates that don't really want to pass him the ball. Now, maybe some of that was on him, and maybe some of that was on his teammates. But it's a big chance for Rudy Gobert to bounce back this year. Rounding out this core four is Jaden McDaniels, who has blossomed into one of the NBA's best 3-and-D players. It was a travesty that McDaniels didn't end up on an all-defensive team this past season, as his defensive impact was talked about and seen from everyone. He was constantly locking down superstar players, having highlight-worthy plays, and if he was healthy for the playoffs, I feel like the talk surrounding him would have been even greater. His third-year leap was great. He made big leaps in not just his scoring and shooting, but his scoring ability, having massive improvements on his on-ball game. The playmaking still needs work, and his foul tendency needs to be toned down, but the 22-year-old out of Washington is well on his way to having all-star success in this league. Now, rounding out this starting lineup is Mike Conley, a midseason trade that really turned his team around. He's an ideal fit for this Wolves team, as he brings much-needed facilitating, shooting, defense, and most importantly, some leadership. Despite his age, Mike Conley still brings a lot to the table, doing so without really getting in anybody's way. And then we have the bench unit for this team that is filled with straight dogs, looking to make impacts night in and night out. Naz Reid is the sixth man for this team. His career year inked him an extension with the team, and he's a viable center option outside of Gobert and Cat. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a throw-in from the D'Angelo Russell trade and has made a long-lasting impact on this Timberwolves team. And then we have Kyle Anderson, who's the ultimate glue guy for the Wolves, as he does it all for them. And besides that, they have a bunch of other guys ready for a chance once called upon. And that right there is your 2023-2024 Minnesota Timberwolves, a team hungry for success. A starting lineup of 5 top 100 players is not something a lot of teams can say that they have. The fit for this team makes a lot more sense now than it did a year prior. And coach Chris Finch is the perfect, hard-nosed, aggressive coach to lead this team. They went all in, and now's the time for them to put it all together. As much as people want to clown the Wolves, I actually see them making some real noise. You have to think, this team now has a year of chemistry and playoff experience. They've made the necessary moves to improve how the team fits together, and players like Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels are going to make progressions in their game. And you have to think as well, looking at the rest of the Western Conference, with the uncertainty surrounding the Warriors, the injury concerns of the Clippers, John Morant's suspension for the Grizzlies, and the uncertainty surrounding other teams like the Pelicans, the Thunder, and the Mavericks, the Wolves could be a sneaky bet at a top 4 seed in the Western Conference, finishing with maybe over 50 wins. Now, this could all just be me projecting, and we could see the same old Wolves that we've seen over the last decade, but I truthfully see something in this team. And I believe this is the year that they finally put it all together and shock everyone.